Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the Stories That Inspire Us podcast. My name is Janis, your host, and today I have an amazing guest on. And let me just start by saying that you all know, of course, that I host 3 podcasts, and she was on my business podcast, TrulyYourVA with Janis. And Nichole has such an amazing, inspiring background. But before we go any further, I am so excited to welcome to the Stories podcast, Nichole Howson. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited.
You're so welcome. And as I mentioned, I had you on my business podcast, and Nichole really, just very briefly, built her business in such an amazing way, okay? From the ground up. Her name of her business is Ames Marketing. And it's really an all-encompassing, so much more than just social media. And I'll just kind of leave it at that. Why don't we start out with there a little bit, and then we're going to hop into the subject we're going to be chatting about today, which is, of course, mental health.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, like you said, I run a social media marketing company. I started 8 years ago. And yeah, started from absolutely nothing. It was supposed to be a part-time job, just while I was waiting for school to start. I had moved home. I was having some mental health crisis issues and needed a job I could do from home that wasn't gonna take up too much of my time because I was still in recovery and everything. And so I thought, you know what, let's give it a try. I'd taken a course in college that I really enjoyed and was like, let's see what happens. So I started my business, or what I thought was a part-time job. And then when I went to school for marketing, by the time I graduated, I had enough of the client base. It didn't make sense to shut it down and get a job somewhere else.
And that is mind-blowing, and congratulations. You know, I think especially women in the workforce today, coming from a background with marketing and whatnot, it did not make any sense for you to close that down. And I'm sure, of course, your clients and your employees are very glad that you didn't. So that is amazing. Excuse me. As I kind of alluded to the fact, you know, we're going to be chatting, of course, about mental health. And we know that many people suffer. There's so many different layers of mental health. And as you had mentioned, you had a mental health crisis, and being raw and authentic in a way to share your story from where you are, or where you were, I should say, to where you are today is, in my opinion, kind of mind-blowing. But sharing your story in a way that honors your journey is even more inspiring for me, because so many people suffer from so many different mental health issues, whether it be depression or whatever it may be. Would you mind sharing with us a little bit about your story?
Yeah. So when I was a teenager, I struggled with depression and anxiety and self-harm. And when I turned 19, 20-ish, around there, I had what we now know to be a manic episode. At the time, it just looked like I was cutting off my family, and I moved to the other side of the province and moved in with a guy, which was very abnormal for me because I had been in Bible college. Like, that's against rules. So I just kind of uprooted my life, and nobody really understood what was going on. And so I thought maybe something changed in my personality or whatever, but nobody even, it didn't cross anybody's mind that maybe it was my mental health that was causing this. And so I moved away, and after a while, what goes up must come down. So my manic episode for me, I was doing things that were very uncharacteristic for me. I was spending a lot of money. I was drinking. I was doing things that I normally wouldn't have ever done. So it was definitely something was wrong. And I remember like feeling like everything was going too fast, like all the time. Actual fact, it was my brain and me that was going too fast all the time. But I felt like I just couldn't keep up with everything. So eventually what goes up must come down. So then I had a really deep depression. And when I did that, I became very suicidal. So I struggled quite a bit, and asked for help multiple times from the hospital and from crisis centers and everything else. And over time, they give me different medications to try, but nobody actually explained to me like, okay, this medication is going to help with your depression, but you have to take it consistently all the time. Also, you're not supposed to drink on it. Nobody told me these things. So I'm still drinking. I'm taking the meds. I was like, oh, I feel good today. I'm not going to take them. Just completely nothing the way that they're supposed to work. And so I was doing that for a while. Unfortunately, what they also didn't realize is because I have bipolar disorder, the antidepressant they were putting me on without a mood stabilizer causes a manic episode. So then I went from depressed to feeling really great again. So I was fine, I thought, until I crashed again. And so this happened multiple times over the course of a year. And it hit a point where I was like, okay, I just can't do this anymore. I'm done. And so I went to the hospital. I asked for help. And when they sent me home, I attempted the first time to take my life because I was just so done. So yeah, I found myself back in the hospital. They released me the next morning. It's a whole not wonderful story about how the hospital really failed me at that point. They sent me home the next morning and I attempted the second time that night. At that point, I had said goodbyes to people. I'd sent texts to everybody saying goodbye. And my parents got in the car. I lived 8 hours away. They drove 8 hours in the middle of the night to come, and they didn't know what they were going to find. They didn't know what was going on. They hadn't heard from me at all. So they just got in the car and started driving. And so they got there and the doctor met them in the waiting room and said, listen, you got to take her home or she's not going to make it home. Like, we can't help her here. So they packed up my life, brought me back down to where home actually is, and brought me to the hospital here. I saw a psychiatrist, and this is where the journey of recovery actually really started, because the psychiatrist that I saw there, I remember I was sitting there and I can, like, to this day remember everything about, like, the room, everything, which is weird because I don't remember a lot of the different things that happened during that time. But I was sitting there and I was staring at the ground because I was just so disappointed in myself. And I was so ashamed of everything that I had done. And so I told them my story. My mom gave them the medication that I had been on, and what was going on. I was also having migraines while I was up there. So they were giving me morphine in the hospitals, trying to help with the migraines and everything else. So all these different medications put together, they cause seizures, which I was having. And so I'd say, like, part of my face feels weird and like something's going on. And they scanned and everything. Well, you're not having, like, there's no tumors or anything. We don't know what's going on. And it was the medication. So anyway, I remember sitting there and I was just staring at the ground, and the psychiatrist got down right in front of me, and she got down on her knees. She looked at me and made eye contact with me, and she goes, "This is not your fault." And I was like, because it wasn't. First of all, I didn't cause my bipolar disorder. I have it, and that's how it is. Nobody knew that, so we didn't have any way of treating it because we didn't know that I had it. And with all the medications that I was on, she's like, you were set up to fail, just with the medications alone. So it was really interesting. They got me into a series of recovery programs and that sort of thing, got me on some medication that helped me stabilize. And yeah, the last 8 years have been a struggle. I also have PTSD, so that's fun. So there's a lot of ups and downs, but for the most part, I've been stable since then. And it's been a journey, but it's been a good one.
Wow. so much, of course, comes to mind, but first and foremost, thank you again for sharing so much detailed information, because I think it's really important for anyone who may be listening or viewing this podcast that it is, number one, as you said, when your therapist got down on her knees and looked you straight in the eye and said, it is not your fault.
Mm-hmm.
Because I am assuming that when you're taking all of this in, and as you mentioned, you were disappointed and you were ashamed, and and I would assume as well that you're at that point thinking, like, am I screwing up my life? Like, am I contributing to this? But you didn't, because of everything that had transpired. But and I also want to recognize your parents as well, because
Mm-hmm.
that is such, right then and there in that moment, that is such an integral pivot, not only for your parents, but for you as well. Will you share with us, you had mentioned the recovery programs.
Mm-hmm.
What was that like for you?
Sure. Yeah, so I was put in the outpatient program. My parents agreed to taking care of me, and so there were certain things they had to do. They were in charge of giving me my meds and that sort of thing to make sure I was taking them. So they never actually admitted me to the hospital at that point. So it was an outpatient program for 3 weeks. So I'd have to go in first thing in the morning and sit through some training. They explained to me what, like, depression, anxiety, PTSD, bipolar disorder, panic attacks, everything that I was struggling with. They explained all that to me. It was like a little class. They talked about self-care and breathing techniques and different things like that. So I was able to sit through all of that and learn a lot more about what was happening in my body that I didn't understand. And so that was really, really helpful. They got me in to see a psychiatrist, and that was helpful, a therapist as well. And so I started to build up these resources that helped me recover over the course of time.
And that is really paramount, because I think when you go into a recovery program, as you did it on an outpatient basis, it's also, it's a learning process for not only the patient, but for the family involved.
Mhm.
And, to realize that from a parent's point of view, that your child is suffering under these enormous things that are going on, the PTSD, the bipolar, and everything else.
Mhm.
Did they also have programs that would involve your parents?
We didn't do that at that point. They gave me pamphlets that I brought home and had my parents read, so that was helpful. My mom got a lot of her support online, and had people educate her on what bipolar disorder looks like and how she could help and that sort of thing. Yeah, we found a lot of help online.
That is wonderful. Now, of course, I know for some people that these mental health issues tend to be, as they might say, genetic. Was there any type of history in your family on either side that maybe one of your parents could say, well, this person I know in my family, or that person?
There is suspected that I think it was my great aunt or somebody like that may have had bipolar disorder, depression, anxiety, all that runs in the family. So it wasn't too much of a shock. But yeah, it definitely explained what was going on with me when we found out.
Yeah, because I think that the family history is really an integral part of going forward, and it kind of goes back to, you were there and now you're here. Well, what transpired in between? And now that you are in such, I think, a much better place in your life, that you're able to kind of maybe look back on your journey and say, shit, I have to share my story here. And
Mhm.
that's why, when we did your business, when you were on my business podcast, and I just felt this connection to you, that there was really more of a story behind
Mhm.
the story. And speaking of stories, I see all those amazing books behind you. Now, as you're sitting here today, and you're talking about everything that you've been through with such an amazing respect for yourself, what
Mhm.
would you say to somebody out there right now who is kind of going through what you've been through, and continue in some respects to go through?
Yeah. First of all, you're not alone. A lot of people are going through the same thing as you. That doesn't necessarily make it better. But knowing that these feelings and what you're going through, they're not okay in the sense that like it's not fun. But you're not doing it. It's not your fault, essentially. It just like my psychiatrist told me. So knowing that's really helpful. One of the things that I recommend you do is when you're having a good day, kind of map out what you're going to do on a bad day and what are the steps. So me and my mom sat down when I first came home to recover, and we had, okay, on a bad day, if I'm feeling suicidal, I'm going to do this and then this. If this doesn't work, then we're going to call a psychiatrist and we're going to do this. And worst case scenario, mom's going to take me to the hospital. And so we had those steps. So it wasn't like, oh my gosh, I'm suicidal, I don't know what to do. And then blah. So it was like, okay, this is how I'm feeling. This is what we're going to do. And we had those steps, because when you're in a bad place, logical thinking through the steps is not going to happen. You're in a bad place and you can't, it's hard to get yourself out of there. But when you have those steps and you say, okay, I'm having a bad day or I'm suicidal, this is what we're going to start with. And then you're like, oh, you know what, actually, I am doing better. And this puts it into perspective and that sort of thing. And so you can minimize a lot of your struggles that way.
And thank you for sharing that, because I I believe that part of that process for you, um, again, speaking from a parent's point of view, that must have made your parents proud of you, in the fact that you contributed to that, you participated and mapped out, okay, when you're having a good day, but when you're having a bad day, like there was a plan of action, and you took control of that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Wow. So now you've started, you go through all this. When was it, you said you've been in business for about 8 years,
8 years. Yeah.
when you decided to really, and you went to school for marketing, and you start your business, what was that like to show up for yourself, looking back at your journey? I mean, that must have been, whoa.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It's funny, my first semester or two of college, I was so checked out still. I had shaved most of my head. I wore big hoodies and stuff like that. And I kind of just like zombied my way through school. I got good grades, but I didn't really talk to anybody. I wasn't outgoing. And it was funny because the second year I came in and I felt refreshed, and I was like, okay, like I'm here, I'm gonna do this. And I was in a much better place. And I was like, man, like where did you transfer from? And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I've been here the whole time. Like, no, you weren't. And I was like, no, really, I was. Because I made all these new friends and stuff like that. And they're like, I don't remember you at all. And I was like, no, because I didn't talk to anybody. And I sat in the front row and hid behind my hoodies. So definitely completely different person. And so it brought me out of my shell a lot. And it was really interesting to like be like, okay, like this is who I am. I started like feeling this sense of pride of I have clients and like I am running a business and that sort of thing. It was really helpful.
I was just going to ask you, but you already answered my question. And knowing, um, being in school, starting your business, are you proud of yourselves? And you said that you have this sense of pride.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's phenomenal, because now you have this, like I said, all-encompassing marketing, social media business, and you also employ people that work for you.
Hmm. Yeah.
Wow. That is pretty awesome. I had to pause for a moment because, I am thinking of the struggle that not only you went through, but your family, and then to be where you were and where you are today, as I've often said, that is so important to point out. Now, tell us, what are some things other than your business that you love to do? I would assume it would be reading, as evidenced by that amazing bookcase.
It very much is. Reading is like my number one hobby right now. I'm so busy with work and everything else that I spend all day staring at computers. So watching TV at the end of the day is the last thing I want to do. So
Yeah.
I read a lot of books, and maybe not marketing books like the ones behind me, but I do read a lot. And going for walks and just going for coffee with people, that sort of thing. It's always really nice to just get out of the house and have
Mhm.
dinner with a friend or something like that. So
That's awesome. And what would your employees say about you?
oh, I asked them one time what they liked about working with me. And knowing that I was very understanding about what they were going through. And I say to all my team members and potential new team members, I'm one of the most easygoing, relaxed bosses you'll ever have, as long as you're communicating with me. Just let me know what's going on and I'll support you in any way that I can. And that's just kind of my personality, because I've been there. I've been in bad places. And so if you are, I so support you. I'm going to be there for you. I just need to know so that way I can support you.
That is so amazing, because that not only says a lot about your employees, of course, but it says so much more about you. So thank you for sharing that. How many employees do you have, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah. So currently right now we've got 4 on staff. And hopefully we're going to bring some of them back in the new year when things pick up. So
That's amazing. Now, I'm just going to poke your brain a little bit.
sure.
What is your favorite social media platform,
Oh,
and why?
yeah. I really want to say TikTok because I have the most fun there. But honestly, I spend the most time like not marketing, but like posting on Facebook, because I find I can tell stories that way in long form and get the engagement and the comments and that sort of thing. So I really enjoy that side of the social media more than anything. So I guess I'd have to say Facebook, which I know is not, people are like, Facebook. So I feel like it's the wrong answer, but that's the answer I have. So
Well, that's awesome though. And I've recently gotten on TikTok, and it's fun. I find it so much
mhm,
more fun. And it may be my new favorite. I'm not really sure yet. But in any
mhm.
event, now, what is one thing, for instance, what is your holiday schedule like? And how does that play into your mental health? Because sometimes we have to really balance that out.
Yeah. So I'm gonna be honest with you, my holiday schedule is the same schedule as everything else. I'm very busy. Up until 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago now, I always worked on Christmas Day. It was what it was. But I've started really taking care of my self-care time. So like I work 2 jobs right now. I'm my business, and then I took a seasonal job because apparently I didn't want to be bored this holiday. I don't know. So I was like, let's do a seasonal job, see what happens. So like I work a lot, and so on my downtime, like I read. I will say to myself, you know, I've got 2 hours between working from home and working there, so I'm going to read for an hour and just take my time getting ready and that sort of thing. Instead of trying to cram more work into that hour, I can take a little bit to reset. So I take little breaks throughout the week versus saying, okay, I'm going to take a whole lot. So holiday season's essentially the same thing. Other than I try to take Christmas Day off so I can spend time with my family.
Well, that's good. I'm so glad to hear that. And I know, especially as women, we often talk about self-care, and I really feel that self-care is paramount and it's not selfish. When you started taking action in your life, how did you come up with a schedule, or as you just said, I have like 2 hours in between from when you stop your business to where you have to go to your seasonal job? What would you say to someone who's like, I don't have time for self-care?
Make time. Put it in your calendar if you have to. You can find time when you really want to. I used to say that all the time. Oh, I don't have time. And then I looked at how much. I did a time study actually, and this is where I really learned it. I realized how much time I was spending scrolling on my phone when I was working. And so I was like, oh my gosh, like I have an extra 2 hours of my day as soon as I just shut my phone off and didn't scroll on social media during the day. And then I can scroll at night if I want to for a little bit. And there's days where I'll be like, okay, I'm going to set a timer for 30 minutes. I'm going to just scroll and catch up on social media, check out my notifications and that sort of thing. But I'm way more aware of how much time I'm spending on my phone, which is usually where people lose their time to without realizing that they are.
I have to agree with you with that, because I think we're all guilty of scrolling.
Oh, for sure.
And of course, I don't know with the Android phones, but I know with the iPhones, you get the weekly, oh, you've been on your phone for 7.8 hours, like what, per day, but of course we do, we use our cell phones and devices for work as well. So I'm not too fazed by that. However, I am mindful, of course, and that's why I keep my stack of books back here. So if I'm, doing something where I have an in between, I pick up a book. I don't allow myself to scroll during my quote unquote office hours.
Mm-hmm.
Now with social media too, and with different news alerts, I just want to share this tip because somebody said to me, oh my God, that's amazing. I got to start doing that. But I think with all the notifications that we're getting these days, and let's just be real, there's a lot of them.
Oh, for sure.
What I did was I turned off all my notifications and I just set myself like a little alarm. Okay, this is when I check my email. This is, that type of thing. So if you're struggling with those notifications, it's okay to turn them off. And I think a lot of times there's the FOMO, the fear of, of course, missing out. We're not going to miss out. We need that. We need that downtime. Oh my gosh. Can you tell our viewers and listeners where they can get in contact with you, and how they can connect with you further? Obviously TikTok, Facebook.
Yeah, really any social media platform. My username's the same on almost all of them. So it's just Nichole Howson. Just make sure there's an H in Nichole. And yeah, I'm around all the time. So
Well, thank you so much. Nichole, your story, I know, will resonate with so many people, and being real, being authentic, but really sharing your story in a way that honors your journey, to me, is just so inspiring. So thank you so much for sharing your story and taking the time to be here today.
no problem. Thank you so much for having me.
You're so welcome. Well, everyone, of course, I will make sure of Nicole's contact information is in the show notes, of course. And remember, if you have a story to share and you're not really sure how to go about doing that, please feel free to reach out to me. I would love to be able to share your story to inspire others. My name is Janis, the host of Stories That Inspire Us. Today, truly continue to be inspired by this amazing young woman. Everyone have a great day. And remember, you are worth the time to take your self-care. You need to take that time for you. Thank you, everyone, and have a great afternoon. Bye for now.